Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'm sure a few more people will be popping on as we read through this. So I will just start. For those of you who may not have been here before, I'm Amber Logue. I am the chair of the master plan. We do have some representatives as well from the city of Nashua, as well as UTL, who will be leading the majority of our conversation and discussion this evening. And so since we are meeting via Zoom instead, due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Sununu as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to executive order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically until further notice. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen I can't even say that word, contemporaneously, close enough, to the meeting, which was authorized to meet electronically pursuant to the governor's order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that the committee is providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. This committee is video conferencing utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting, and the public access to this meeting is provided via Zoom. And the link to the meeting is contained in the meeting agenda available on the city website. If anybody has a problem accessing the meeting via phone, please call 603-589-3064 and they will help you connect. Thank you, everyone, for going through that. Now we'll do a quick roll call. So if you want to take yourself off of mute, please state that you are present and if there is anyone in the room with you or if you are alone. Scott LeClaire.
Present and alone.
Adam Varley.
Present and alone.
Dave Tenza. Okay. No, Dave Tenza. Raymond Guillarno.
Garino.
Thank you.
I'm here. I'm alone. I'm going to have to leave about 5:30, I think, because I have a Board of Education meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Well, the recording will be available if you would like to catch up later. We can also email you some of the slides.
Okay.
Heather Raymond. Kate Luska.
Let's go. And present, and I am alone.
Thank you. Paul Shea.
I am present and I am alone.
Will Dan O'Donnell also be joining, Paul?
I do not know. I've not talked to Dan today.
Okay. John, I'm going to pre-apologize. John Jersek.
Yes, I'm right here.
Got it. Perfect.
Perfect.
I did practice right before. Scott Cody. No, Scott. Okay. Bob James. No, Bob. Okay. Raymond Brousseau. Okay, not here. Me, Amber Logue, I am present and alone. Rabbi John Spira-Savet.
I am here and alone.
Thank you. Marjorie Bollinger-Hogan.
I am here and I am alone.
Jean Porter.
I am present. I am not alone. Nancy Garcelle, my spouse, is here.
Okay, hi Nancy. Heidi McDonald, are you here on the call? No. Heidi will be sworn in, I believe this evening to be on the committee. So she's not yet, doesn't yet have any voting capability until this evening. Gloria McCarthy was not able to make it. We did get a message. Peter Schaefer.
Peter Schaefer, I'm alone.
Okay. Mary Ann Molizagoya did send us a message. She may join us later. And last but not least, Homa Jeffrey.
Present and alone.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us through that. And we appreciate your time and don't want to waste too much of it this evening. Will, do you want to take it away?
Yes, of course, and good evening. And just, I guess, for the sake of transparency for everyone else, my family will be in and out. They're not here at the moment, but we're living the Boston triple decker life, so we'll only be moderately alone. Okay, so my question is, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so we have a couple different things that we would like to talk to you about this evening. First is an update on where we are. A little bit of a recap of we had some discussion last meeting about the role that you all have, and as we're getting into this next meeting, this will be a good chance to sort of talk about that in a little bit more detail. A bit of an update about the community engagement process we've had so far and what we're going to do next there, as well as then the rest of it will be about the public workshop. We have a big meeting coming up at the beginning of January, and we want to talk to you about sort of how that's going to go. Okay, so I believe you saw a version of this diagram at the last meeting. So we are now, a little bit further along in the process. We are in the middle of working on the sort of future trends assessment, thinking about existing conditions and where we're going from here, as well as beginning to connect all those things together in advance of, that dot for public meeting 2, which we still have targeted for, in a few weeks. We had a big discussion at the last meeting about topic areas, the relationship of the 5 that we had, how they relate to the different vision and core values. We don't need to rehash all of that in its entirety, but it is worth seeing that we've sort of streamlined the idea a little bit. And originally we had sort of 5, and now we agree that arts and culture can be its own separate topic area that are these 6 plan elements. Equity, resilience, and climate protection are important things, but we're not individually calling those elements of the plan so much as values that should be threaded throughout the entire process. Where we're going to go from there is that we need to now start thinking about something which is not so high level for the process. It's the 2 remaining pieces, goals and actions. Goals are what we're going to be working out at this next public meeting, and then actions are sort of where the rest of the plan goes. So to that end, here's another diagram which really kind of makes the same point, right? The ideas of equity, resilience, and climate protection are fundamental to the plan. They are ideas that should be informing all the other aspects of where we're going. With that, there's this idea of a vision statement. And this is actually something required in New Hampshire law for the master plan. You need to have a vision statement and then the plan itself. And so we need to have one statement, and we think it should be actually, a sentence about what the point of Imagine Nashua is, why the plan is happening, where the city wants to be. Within that, we want to create goal statements underneath each of the 6 plan elements. And a rough count of where we're thinking is something on the order of 5 of them per plan element. So up to, but preferably definitely no more than 30 goals across the planning process. Those goals are still not maybe as granular or nitty-gritty as perhaps some constituents would like, right? Wanting to fix the pothole is not, well, it's definitely not a vision. Well, depending on who you ask, it's not a vision for the city of Nashua, fixing a pothole. It's not about specifically equity, resilience, or climate protection. It's not really an element of the plan, nor is it a goal, but something about improved infrastructure could be one of the actions that the city would, in a more concrete way, take to achieve those things. So depending on the feedback we're receiving from people, some of what does or doesn't seem like it's matching up with what we're getting, maybe because it doesn't necessarily fall in the right place for where we're going on the spectrum. So we've been starting out really, really big, and we'll be getting increasingly concrete as the process goes. So where we're going to sort of make sure that this idea of visions and goals make sense is alongside preparing for this public meeting. We've also been doing a lot of analysis on just pulling the basic information together about the city, right? This is not where this is going to be in 30 years. It's what do we, see happening right now. So you can already see a lot of the sort of high-level pieces of information, right? The breakdown of units across the city of Nashua, right? The change in population over, the last couple of decades, where we're going to go next. Generational shifts across the city. In the bottom, a small version of all the different businesses via the different sector types across the city, letting you see sort of the spread of job creation and so on. We are going to basically publish this as a detailed report on the website when we give the next public meeting, but we're not going to go through it in excruciating detail at the public meeting. We're just going to give sort of the main highlights so that the overall context we're talking about sort of feels consistent across everyone who's attending the meeting. So that's sort of the general phase of where we are. One piece of it is sort of the analytical side of things, right? The existing conditions, and then once the NEAR starts, getting the sub-consultants more engaged in coming up with the details of what we should be doing about all of these topic areas. Separate from that, there's sort of this parallel track of engagement that we've started and that will be, continuing, right? So, where we were last time was, the committee meeting. We had our first kickoff public meeting. We opened that survey and we're beginning to do sort of additional targeted outreach, with city staff and other kinds of processes. And now we're taking the fruits of that and moving them forward into what we want to do next. So, we have had on the order of a little under 500 people fill out the poll list so far. About 300 plus of them have filled it out enough that we were able to kind of place them on the spectrum of the different kinds of commentary, which is good. That means that based on the hundreds and hundreds of statements submitted, or 200 plus, sorry, I shouldn't have said hundreds and hundreds, we have across all the people who voted, across all the different statements, there have basically been votes from Nashua stakeholders 23,000 times about the way they think about things. This is a good outreach. This is a good start. And I would say that while, we originally were shooting for higher, what I've been trying to keep in mind is actually we have limited the goal of this survey to be about what is absolutely the most boring part of the planning process. It's not the details. It's not the really controversial stuff. It's what do you think about the city? And the fact that we got 400 people to weigh in consistently, thousands and thousands and thousands of times about this high level vision actually provides us with a lot of information. And so we feel really good about this as we're working on developing the goal statements. So in a little bit more detail, if we look at all the different comments, right? Of the 335 people-ish that we have who've been categorized, there's this chart, you see that's over on the right. There's A and B. And so you can see it says group A is about 70 something people, group B is 250 plus people. So it's, like a 75-25-ish kind of split. And you can see that group A, which is the first one, it's over on the right, it's got fewer people, which are the purplish dots, but it encompasses a wider range of opinions. Whereas group B has more people, which are the green dots, that are sort of closer together. There's more agreement there. And then the statements kind of fall across the spectrum too. So a lot of the statements sort of fall more on the side of group B's opinions. And actually, there's only a few statements that fall in line with group A's opinions. So let's look at some statements that make group A unique, right? One of the most clear ones that, actually only, 30, 40 something of them agreed with was, let's look at taxation is theft, right? Group A strongly agrees with that idea, B strongly disagrees with it. Group A does not think that there should be investment in the theater community, not worried about carbon emissions. I would say that it actually means that there's a fair chunk of people who fill the survey out who might have one of a couple different opinions, right? Either disagreement with the process, not particularly interested in having governments, take a strong role in these kinds of issues. But even if that's true, even if it's sort of maybe a bit of an oppositional group, within that there is some things, right? Still strong in favor of the idea that Nashua being a place where you can live and work here together, right? And there's still places of agreement across that. Group B, on the other hand, very much seems to strongly favor things like worrying about carbon emissions, supporting local arts, worrying about environmental change, and so on. Which is a long way of saying that there's a lot of consensus around major initiatives that actually the city is already very much engaged in, right? Issues about public, increasing the funding towards and placement of public art, green and open space, community events. These are clear things that, you know, are almost like no-brainers from the perspective of the master plan because they get consensus across all of it. There are also areas where maybe it's not so clear. It's not that people aren't sure, but that there isn't full agreement one way or the other. And these are topics like, should there be new development in and around the city? What about development around conservation areas? What about the effect of climate change? What to do with parking? I mean, parking is actually maybe the classic issue of not having full consensus on what to do, but the way we're thinking about this is those are areas that are going to be important to address one way or other in the plan, but the fact that there's not consensus right off the bat means that the next level of engagement, the issues that we talk about at future meetings and future sort of touch points with the public, this is where we get to talk about it in a more nuanced way. It's not so easy to say before we've done anything else that there's clear consensus. So those are the areas where we need to focus going forward. But it's not all just about this one survey, right? In addition to the sort of online poll list tool that we talked about, the city's been working very, very hard to have a more analog or more sort of manual way of doing it to reach people who don't want to fill it out on the website. And so there's been a call over the last, weeks and months to ask residents of the city how you imagine Nashua using a hashtag. And so there's a little piece of paper, you can print it out, you can write it up, and you can post it. And there's been a lot of success across the board. There, especially with the Boys and Girls Club, it turns out, as is reassuring to know, that the future generations actually have things to say that are perhaps a lot more creative than what we're thinking about when we get kind of bored and repetitive. And so, whether it's being well informed about ideas like housing affordability, or just recognizing that modes of transport are going to change, whether or not flying cars is a great question. This is feedback that we want to be using too. And so we're in the process of documenting sort of the things that are coming in through the hashtag to be additional feedback that we use through the planning process. Which means that actually is still happening, right? That hashtag is still what the city's monitoring. We would encourage anyone who wants to still provide that feedback to do it by either tagging the community development department or hashtag Imagine Nashua. And so that's going to be another venue for sort of providing that information during COVID. Okay, so what I'd like to switch to next is talking about the next public meeting. We have about an hour and a half, and there's a lot of ground that we want to cover, as maybe has been evident from the rapid pace of talking that I'm already giving. Here's what we're thinking for the agenda. First, we've got about 20 minutes where we want to do let's see, how long did I talk so far? 20 minutes, but I give a lot of process about the committee. So if you imagine us taking out all the stuff about like a master plan steering committee and simplifying it down to here's what we've heard so far, and here's where we're going next. We want to spend about that long introducing where we are in the process and what's coming next. That's the introduction. Then what we want to spend the bulk of the time on, which actually is still rather short, it's only about 40 minutes, is we want to use Zoom to break everyone out into smaller groups to discuss these goal statements that we're working on. We're going to provide a draft vision statement and a draft goal statement once we close the poll list and sort of draft statements out of what we've heard so far. And then we're going to have the full set of attendees broken into equal groups. And then those groups will have a chance person's the wrong word, but indigitus, I don't know what the word is, to sort of think through it dynamically and in a smaller group. With that, we're going to provide information about the existing conditions and trends in case that kind of information is something which, the might help inform some of those statements. But then most importantly, we need to have multiple facilitators at each of these groups. So we want to have 2 to 3 facilitators made up of a combination of people from city staff, the consultant team, maybe some of you, people from whatever degree we can get some assistance from maybe the NRPC, a group, a set of facilitators to guide the conversation and keep it focused on the goal statements. And then also, yes.
We have one question.
Oh,
Will you tell me when that would be? No, that's okay. It was a raised hand. Will you tell me when would be a good moment for that? Is now good, or do you want to wait until you are done number 2? Thank you. Rabbi, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I had John is fine, by the way. I had a I guess an observation. I don't know where to park it. I don't think that 400 plus is a great response rate, but part of and I would like to work at, and I certainly will continue to work at getting more people. I guess I'm also curious if you could talk at some point, or if you're not already planning to, on how that feedback is affecting the proposed statements that you're going to be introducing in the next phase, and how we and others would see the connections between those.
That's a great question. Okay, so I think you're right. At the last meeting, I was saying that I thought we were going to be able to get 1,000 people plus. So I agree. The 400 is lower than I wanted it to be. The way that I'm trying to go with, or that we, are trying to go with this, is to remember that this is only the first step of the rest of the process. Usually, things happen a little bit more organically. Like if you're at the farmer's market and you're talking to people, if we're repeatedly going out and during an environment where people want to not just be focused on getting through a hard fall and hard winter and want to be thinking about this process, it feels easier to do that kind of outreach. So it's our hope that as we get a little bit more detailed and we start talking about things that aren't just high level questions, that that will encourage people to actually want to weigh in. Because right now it might feel like the give and take of asking people for their feedback, where they're not learning anything new about the city yet, or actually having any voice about what the changes are going to be. Maybe just the calculation didn't feel as appetizing as we thought it would right off the bat. So that's sort of my very high level postmortem on why the response wasn't as high as we wanted it to be.
And to tack on to that quickly, what we did have individual conversations, and started to have some conversations and with different groups, and that kind of the broad statements that we've all answered were very broad, and people had trouble kind of attaching to those ideas versus the very specific, I need bus stops to come every 30 minutes was much easier. So which we'll get into, we're going to kind of flip it the other way. Instead of starting with a broad statement to narrow it down to a very specific answer, we're going to flip it and get that more very specific feedback that will then tailor back to the broad statements, if that kind of answers the questions. And then when that happens, we'll have a lot more feedback than 440 statements.
To the second point of your question, which was about how the feedback that we're getting is going to inform the goal statements. It's kind of, I would say, it is my hope that the statements themselves should sort of reflect a bit of the spectrum of the feedback that we've heard, right? On the one hand, the point of the goal statements isn't to be wholly polarizing in that, we want them to feel like they reflect some sort of majority-ish will of what the comments that we've been getting are. But on the other hand, they shouldn't be so milquetoast that they're just the obvious consensus, right? And so, what we might do, and what we will likely do, is when one of the goal statements is going to be around, say, the role of Nashua in the metropolitan region. And that itself is something which doesn't have pure consensus. And so my guess is we'll draft some version of it that maybe gets at, more toward the group B's take on things. But over the course of, as group B chooses to actually have to narrow this down to a specific goal for what the city should be, just versus just saying, we care about our relationships to the metropolitan area, that conversation will become increasingly nuanced. We're also going to be, and sorry, let me jump back forward. The reason why we're doing this in small breakout sessions is to basically collect a second kind of feedback, right? This isn't just something where we're going to draft a bunch of initial goals and then, show them to the public and then move on with their day, right? What's actually going to instead happen is if there's 10 different breakout sessions, then there's going to be 10 differently toned and differently cadenced conversations happening around the same kind of thing. And the really important part, so actually now I'm going to transition away from your question and hopefully answer it a little bit better as we move on to the next slide, or as we move through the slide, is that we're going to have also one note taker. And this is actually a really essential role because what we need to have happen is for there to be, a little record of what happened over the course of each of these little breakout room sessions. This isn't just a chance for people to talk and then we move on. Instead, we actually, the sort of takeaway, the survey results, so to speak, of this public meeting are going to be, the 10 records of the different conversations. Our job as the sort of planning consultant city team is going to be to take the original statements, imperfect as they are, and they will be imperfect, and then try to revise them so that the main points that we hear across the 10 groups is better reflected. And then, so that's the bulk of what we want to do in the session. Is there another question? I know that I'm talking a lot and there's people who want to weigh in, so I should probably...
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, okay. And then the third point is after we go through that, we need to try to keep it tight and relatively well managed for about 40 minutes. And then the last piece that we want to use the last 30 minutes for is, okay, great, now that we have goals, what are the next steps? So we'll circle back. We're not going to refix all of the vision or all of the goals live. That'll be something which we have to kind of do after the meeting. But we will, describe some of the high-level takeaways. But the big other piece will then be the second kind of survey, which will be different than the polis. It'll be a mapping platform, which we'll talk about briefly in a moment, and sort of begin to create the second call to action to get some of this more targeted feedback. So here's, and I know I've been using a lot of sort of high-level different words about vision and goals and statements and whatever, and so it might just be worth trying to come up with the definitions that we think generally refer to these different things. And I know that all these words kind of sound the same. So the vision, the thing that we're developing, needs to be a statement, a high-level one, an aspirational statement expressing what we want to accomplish as a city and community, right? This is whatever the ideal we aspire to achieve is. This is actually sometimes kind of a tricky thing. Sometimes communities want to make the vision be a definition of how you see the city of Nashua now, which is not necessarily the point, right? This should be where the city wants to go through the course of this planning process, and of course, many, many years of hard-earned work trying to achieve that. The values, the things which we're calling, or that we're saying are equity, resilience, and climate protection, are fundamental principles which will inform the plan and link the different plan elements together. The plan elements are the sort of topic areas of the plan that put the plan together, which will themselves have what you were just asking about, the goals, which are going to be aspirational outcomes for the plan that the city aspires to achieve. And then finally, the actions are the sort of the smallest greened element, right? The specific approaches, policies, and tools that the city will use to advance and achieve and outline goals. So when we're talking about this, we may want to kind of give examples of this, right? We're going to want to frame the goals to be citizen-centered, what citizens and residents of the city themselves see as an outcome of the planning process. They'll be informed by data as well as the feedback that we've heard, but they will be connected to the sort of smaller needs and actions, right? So if the primary concern that a resident feels is inability to find affordable housing, then a goal might be to increase accessible and affordable housing for all who want to live in Nashua. And some set of multiple different actions ranging from, rethinking funding priorities to easing the ability, or like providing a stronger set of support for nonprofit light tech housing developers or whatever else it is. Those become actions that the city does to work on increasing the accessible and affordable housing, so that ideally the outcome for the citizen would be to find housing better. It's worth noting, we mentioned this before, but a lot of success has come out of the plan from 2000, right? A lot of work has been happening over the last 20 years in Nashua to conserve and protect natural resources and open space, and to increase multimodal forms of transportation. And so, those are going to be important going forward, but we're going to want to think about what other kinds of issues feel particularly salient, for the next decade or two. So we need some things from you in the meantime. We need your role to be helping us serve as an ambassador for the planning process. And to the rabbi's point, it's really, we're finding it is in fact quite essential to promote engagement with this process. Since the last meeting, we've sort of, with a great deal of shoes hitting the pavement, or whatever the metaphor is, like a lot, there's been a lot of work from the planning department to make and strengthen processes for creating promotional materials, getting them posted across the city, having things happen with, getting signs posted on the buses. And so now that we have kind of those processes a little bit better formed as we're working on the next phases, I think we'll be able to roll those things out better. But that still doesn't replace the ability of you all as, important members of the community to also help get the word out. And so we want you both to help us with promoting attending meetings, providing feedback, but also to be willing to answer questions for people who don't know what the point of this project is or why it's happening. In addition, we still have a couple additional committee meetings. And as we start to put together this information, we need your help to continue to vet it. So, the Imagine Nashua outreach with the hashtag, that is ongoing. It'd be great if you could encourage people to provide feedback still that way, and also to encourage people to attend the next public meeting. We are still in the process of drafting goals right now. We're not, also part of our way, we're not sharing them even in their particularly nascent state, is we don't want to actually spend this meeting talking about the goals. We're just explaining sort of how this goes versus the rest of it. So what's going to happen is very soon we're sort of wrapping up getting a lot of them drafted. We're going to send them out to the committee, and we'd like you all to sort of get familiar with them as they are. What's really, really important to see is they're not done. In fact, they're very much not done. They're just going to be written enough that there's something that's standardized that the different groups can talk about. And so it'd be great if you all as committee members can get kind of familiar with them as they are. And again, like if you disagree with aspects of it or want to lead a conversation that points things in that direction, that's what the public meeting is very much for. But if you have comments in advance of that, you can email them to Sarah and we'll try to incorporate. And then, the big thing which we're working on right now is to prepare for this public meeting. We are setting up a range of we're setting up, a lot of breakout rooms that we need to have ready, facilitated, and, there to take notes on. And so if you're interested in being a facilitator for the session, you should come talk to us, talk to Sarah. But actually, note-taking is just as important, if not more important, because that will be the creation of sort of the records that we use to actually revise the goal statements. It is that we're saying that we will be recording the breakout rooms, but we've learned enough in the year of 2020 that technology works just as much as it doesn't work. And so while it's nice to think that we could, just have a bunch of recordings that we can use after the fact, watching 10 hours of video, as well as the fact that maybe the recordings won't work, is why we really need the note-taking process to still be the bulk of sort of how all that stuff is memorialized with a recording more as a backup thing, if you need to sort of refer to a specific statement or something like that. And then finally, what we'll need you to help us do is, once the public meeting is concluded, to encourage people to then fill out the mapping platform, which we'll be, unveiling. So what we're going to be working on in the meantime, up until January 6th, is completing our work on the existing conditions report, getting that posted to the website, finishing making stuff for the public meeting. We'll be setting up the digital mapping survey, and we'll continue to post it. So just so you know, we don't have it ready yet to show you, but the way it's going to basically work is there's going to be a map of the city of Nashua with an ability to place, 3 different dots. We haven't quite settled the phrasing for it yet. We're trying to make sure it's clean and simple, but it's something to the effect of things that you think are good about Nashua, things that you think should be better, and things that you'd like to see, comments, right? But instead of just being high level, what you think about the city, it'll actually be spatial. It'll be a dot that you place in a certain place in Nashua, and you put a comment about it. And then others can place their own comments or choose to like or dislike that comment. So it allows it to be much more grounded and specific. And so that will help us get into more detailed things, which will help inform, actions and other aspects of the plan. So that's what we're working on, developing digitally, which we'll have for the next meeting. And I believe that is the last slide. All right, so it's 5:30. I hope it didn't go too fast, but I'd now like to use the rest of this time to sort of answer any questions that you all have, clarify things that weren't clear, and then talk about how we can sort of prepare for this public meeting.
Can I just jump in real quick? Thank you, Will. That was awesome. Just to be clear for everybody, you will be getting an email tomorrow with all the advertising information for this public meeting that's coming up. You don't have it yet. If you're looking in your inbox and like, wait a minute, what is she talking about? You don't have it yet. It is coming. It will come up tomorrow. There will be things that are easy to share on social media in color. There will also be printed things you can print easily for handouts. There will be things you can easily email. I'll send you a form email, just like I did last time for the public meeting, something you can cut and paste and easily share in your local newsletters, in any of the normal dissemination ways that you do that. So those will all be coming in your emails tomorrow. So look for those. And yeah, we really, helping us to spread the word as wide and as far as you can is greatly appreciated.
We did have a few comments. I just closed out, that had come in. Peter Schaefer had, I won't read through it all. I believe everyone probably did. But I think you're spot on there, that we should view the future of Nashua as a destination for these things. And that's the feedback that we're seeming to get, which is wonderful. And I think that will end up coming through in the stated goals, which will, as Will said, we would be sending out before the meeting, before the public meeting, correct, Will?
Wait, am I muted?
Goals?
That's correct.
No,
We'll
you're
be
not.
sending, yes, I'm sorry.
Perfect.
Yes, the answer is yes.
You're okay, you're good. And then Jean Porter, to sum up what you said, the natural resources and open spaces either have a plan or are being worked on, with the exception of the Pennachuck corridor, which should be our next focus. Is that, did I sum that up pretty good?
All right,
Perfect.
good summary.
We do have 2 hands raised, Amber. Bob.
Okay. Before that, I will say I got 2 direct questions to me that I might as well just answer here because they're good ones. The first is how to get a copy of this presentation and the other documents. We were doing some sort of last minute tweaks, and also just in case we misspell anyone's names or have to make any changes, we want to wait till after the presentation to actually post like the final copy. But basically we will, after this meeting, post it, a PDF of this presentation to the website on the documents page and under this events item page. And as we have additional documents, we'll always be posting those onto the Imagine Nashua page. And the second question was about how the goals from what we're doing in this process relate to the public meetings. And I guess it's that, if the first public meeting was the kickoff, and this public meeting is about setting the planning goals, then once these goals are set, we're not going to sort of revisit them as the public meetings go on. We're going to use the next public meeting and the next meetings to sort of work on things at a more granular way. So I would say that in terms of how the goals are sort of woven throughout the meetings, this is really the only one where it's a primary focus. A better way to think about it would be that if the vision is like the constitutional text that you can go back to make sure that the rest of the plan makes sense relative to it, the same is true at a lesser level. I'm mixing all of my metaphors about constitutional, but like if one of them is federal, then maybe the goals are state level or something like that, right? Like it should be true that the actions actually achieve whatever the outcome is for the goal, and the goal should be something which relates to the vision. And so ultimately they should all kind of relate to one another. But we're trying to move past just talking about goals, because as we've mentioned a couple times now at this meeting, it can feel kind of ethereal to people. And in many cases that the detailed stuff is where the fun really happens.
And with that, and then Sarah, there are 2 hands raised. Okay.
First one is Bob James.
Bob James, awesome. Give me just one moment. I think this may be a question that a lot of people have, is the question from Paul Shea that does the online survey officially close, the one that we just presented? If it is still open, should we actually continue to invite people to participate in advance of the public meeting in January?
Yes, we didn't really set a close date, although I guess, I don't know, maybe the end of the year. Let's say the end of the year. I just picked that randomly. Maybe I should run that by someone else first. But basically, it's still open. It's still on the website. People are happy to fill it out. We're going to proceed sort of with the bulk of the comments as they are. But, you know, I would say at the end of the year would be a good time to kind of close it so that we can finalize whatever graphitizing we want to do of the results and get them, you know, into the presentation. But if people want to continue to fill it out, that is totally fine. All of the sort of the reporting, I was just showing you that little web page with the results, that updates live. And so if there's some groundswell of a change of opinion over the next week or something, like we can reassess it in the goal statements. But we've already had, you know, a couple hundred people fill it out. So I would be surprised to hear a massive shift in direction.
I also add, we've had a bunch of smaller focus group meetings, meetings with different seniors groups, the Plus Company, the Interfaith Council, the Continuum of Care. So we've had a lot of kind of staff level meetings, and we have pages and pages and notes from those meetings and those comments. And so those are also feeding in the background to some of these statements and to some of the information that they're pulling together and getting ready for visions and goals.
And also it's worth noting that part of what Sarah's been doing is when she's gotten comments that people didn't themselves add to the poll list, but she's heard through other media, she's sort of been adding those as statements for people to continue to comment on, to kind of bridge that gap where it hasn't been working.
Awesome. Bob James.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I have a couple of questions for Will. Obviously, you have done this with other towns or cities before, and so you have some experience with this. I have some questions about right now. Do we have a specific time frame for deliverables on this master plan?
Yes.
Is that the July meeting?
We're basically looking this. Yeah, we kick this off, you know, around August, and we're shooting for a year-long process. And so the target date is July for completion, approval, you know, put a stamp on it, call it done for the master plan.
So Paul, I think John and Paul have both, and I have the same questions related to the I guess statistical viability of 400 responses in a 89,000 population. And so moving forward, I think you've answered some of these questions, is that we're going to keep this survey open at least for a specific period of time, that it would be dynamic until we get to the point where we feel like we've got a reasonable response. So given the responses that we've gotten so far, do you feel like the time frame is reasonable in order to accumulate the data that you need in order to make this plan viable?
So, and, you know, in the meantime, a couple other people have, you know, sent me direct messages also expressing concern around the response rate so far. it is worth saying that I agree with what you're saying. Like, I wish more people were filling this out. It is not the highest level of public participation I've seen in other planning processes. That said, this is not the end of the public engagement process. This is the first part, the first phase of the rest of it. And I would not frame this as 400 people are now the full extent of what we're doing for the rest of this planning process. I would say that while it's not a p-value of less than 0.05, and so it's not going to make it into the New England Journal of Medicine, that is true, right? Absolutely. But given the complication of asking people to take the time to give high-level comments about it all, it's what we have right now. And so what that means is
there flexibility in extending that?
Oh, sure, of course. But I would rather not continue to ask people to sort of give high-level goals. I think if the feedback that we're, for example, after we do the social pinpoint, if we hear a lot of people who are expressing more detailed points about, like some of the sort of more detailed goal actions or strategies.
I get that. I understand that.
So anyway, sorry, long story short is, if we find that we need to rejigger some of the high level things that we've been hearing as the engagement process continues, yes, that is absolutely open. But I don't want us to mix our message and continue to ask people to wait on this stuff when we're moving on to different
No, I get it. Believe me, I get that. So the other question I had was, in defining the existing conditions, will we have historical trends that led us to this point? Say
that's the bulk of what it is.
That's the shift of what we're going to get.
We're doing demographic analyses, stuff from the Census and the American Community Survey, right? Some of the, we're doing it using parcel information about sales prices, land value, changes in land use. We're looking at business, the mix of businesses across the city. The big catch, and this is where some of the existing conditions isn't pure data analysis, but also sort of explaining what we're seeing, is that there's a fine line. Sorry, it's not a fine line. There is a distinction that we have to make between what's happened in cities across the United States or New England and what's Nashua specific. And we're going to have to tell both of those stories, right? It is true across every city in America that there's been a massive shift in household size and sort of the generational proportions, right? Like the number of people, and I think I even may have mentioned this at our first meeting, right? If, in the middle of the 20th century, generally speaking, most households were 2+ people, with 1.5 kids and a dog living in a single family house. That is, a quarter or a third of a lot of households these days. And some of that's due to the cost of housing, some of that's due to, that people want to be living in cities. So on some level, that trend is true everywhere. Just because it's true in Nashua doesn't make it Nashua specific, nor does it make it less true. And so when we're going through these kinds of trends, what we're going to also be talking about in the existing conditions report is what aspects feel particularly unique and what aspects feel maybe common, but still important to be thinking about. And so some of that's going to be couching around those topics as well, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Will. Adam Varley, you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just had a couple of process-related questions. So the first is, Will, you mentioned that in advance of the next public session on January 6th, that you were planning to send around draft goals, and that you wanted us to sort of go through those and be familiar with them for purposes of the meeting. And so I guess I'm wondering, are you interested in getting feedback from us as to the content of those goals, or does that add complexity, or are you really just looking for us to sort of to be prepared to discuss those? So I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're looking for.
Both.
Okay.
The primary thing is to be familiar with it. If there's sort of minor tweaks or comments you want to make, you're certainly welcome to pass that to us. But I would say that that's going to sort of be added to an extremely long pile of comments that we're going to be looking through as the public meeting's done. Of course, the comments of the committee are especially important, but I would say we would prefer that the bulk of it be just getting a sense of the thing, because it's less at the moment about wordsmithing and sort of getting every single word right in it as to make sure that the principles feel generally like they're there. If it seems like something is woefully sort of off the mark from your understanding of where this planning process should be going, if there's things that are like notably absent, that would be particularly useful. But if it's like tweaking a word here or there, I would worry about that less, because there's a good chance that we're going to be reworking most of the statements anyway after the next meeting.
Okay.
But yes, so if you want to give feedback, you can, but they are very much subject to change.
Understood.
So to attach to them.
No, that's helpful. And then I guess the second process related question I had is, we're talking about doing the breakout sessions as part of this next public meeting. And obviously this group is much smaller than we would have in a public meeting, but it's still fairly large, in terms of, particularly as we get to sort of more granular level discussions. So are we anticipating that at some point we're going to break this group into smaller subgroups to sort of handle discrete tasks as we sort of advance, to getting to, closer to actually having a written master plan?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. It depends on what those discrete tasks would be and how we would break the group into groups.
I think
I don't know if you...
Sorry, I was gonna say, I think as we get into the topic groups, that is the intention, is to have some smaller topic group discussions where some of you would be in each topic, right? You guys all have different skill sets, different perspectives, different backgrounds that you bring to this process. And so, right, land use, right? It would be great to have the planning board reps on land use. There's transportation, there's all these different arts and culture. And so having some of you on each of those topic groups, those smaller group meetings, which starts in the next phase, I think is something that we try to do, and keeping those groups smaller so that, and if they get to be 10, 12, then still having breakout sessions within those groups too. But yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how we can do this better to have true discussion as part of the next phase of this, which is a lot meatier.
Okay, thank you.
John also just wrote one other comment about, one approach to high-level goals being to write some pieces that would speak to the high-level issues and how it flows down. This is something where, we've been going in a little bit of a circle about how best to handle this, where it's a combination of, if we give examples, it's great because it helps clarify what we want to see, but it also has this way of, putting dye in the water right off the bat. And so I think that we could do something like that. And, that's also something which, once we have the goal statements a little bit better, we're going to, I think, probably want to write a couple example actions that could come out of the thing just right off the bat to sort of help contextualize them. But I'm not sure how to... This is where, we're spending a lot of time during this meeting talking about, the hierarchy of one thing versus the other. And one piece of experience that I've got from doing this a few different times is it's useful maybe as a committee to, make sure this feels okay and that we're doing it the right way, but to try to remove as much, superstructure of goal versus action versus strategy versus something at the public meeting, so that it doesn't become 10 different ways to skin a... Why is there more than one way to skin a cat? But instead for it to be about the issues themselves. And so that's part of why we want the first piece of the presentation to only be 10 or 20 minutes, so that we're really just sort of hitting the fundamental pieces of information, and that the bulk of it's actually just talking about the statements. That has been where we found the most success. But if you all have other ways that you think you want to do it, if it's about having some sort of topic sessions or something else like that, that could absolutely work. And it might be something that's a useful way to have more sort of small centered engagement during this time of the pandemic. So I think something like that can make sense, but I don't have it fully formulated in my head of how that might work.
And we will have, during the public meeting, we will have smaller breakout groups that each of us will be facilitating, which is what we just spoke about, and taking notes and having those conversations come up. You may be in a group where maybe nobody cares or doesn't have any opinion about, let's say, land use. Great. Then in that conversation, maybe you skip that and focus on a topic that like climate protection. Maybe the group that you're in, that's all everybody cares about. So that would be the bulk of your conversation. So we'll kind of lean towards what is within those groups. And Paul, before we go on, I know you had a comment a while ago. Did you want to still bring that up?
Yeah, thanks, Amber. I just wanted to note kind of the premise of my question about how long the survey will be open is just that I hear that some folks would like to see more data collected. But personally, looking at this, we're talking about 1 in every 220 people in the city of Nashua. And then you take out children and the number looks better. The confidence interval and all that business are calculable things. And personally, I feel pretty good about the sample size. I just wanted to know kind of what the hard stop was on collecting data, if we could be of any help. But I feel good about it. And all things considered, I think that the committee's done a great job getting the word out. So thank you all.
Awesome, thank you. And I think that you're spot on there, with that. And when we shift into the second phase, which is that map we spoke about with the pinpoints, and somebody can actually put a pinpoint and say, for example, I want a dog waste station here, and people give it a thumbs down or thumbs up or a comment to agree or disagree with it, we'll see a tremendous increase in involvement.
And to Amber's point, that serves a couple different purposes. One, right? Like one, it helps make the thing feel grounded. Like, a dog waste station here, like if you live near there and you want the thing, you can say yes to that, right? So if you think concretely and you don't want to talk about these high level issues, it's just that's the thing you want to see, great. On the other hand, this specific placement of a dog waste station is not ever going to be part of the master plan. So it's not like we're going to take this feedback, of course, right? But the main piece of it that the plan is going to take is that it's a combination of increased funding to the public realm improvements, the importance of recreation spaces, thinking about those places' connection to, depending where this dot is, like, is it for being in the neighborhoods versus a more robust, set of things in and around the parks, right? Like that's the principles that we're going to take out of it. So even if people want to give us something that's really, really grounded, it's our job to sort of interpret it back to what goes into the plan.
Thank you, Will. Sarah, does anybody else?
Peter has his hand raised.
Peter.
Hi. Believe it or not, I don't do Facebook and Twitter and all these things, so I'm not up to speed on much of that. But years ago, we used to have chat sessions and things like that, where you would pick a topic and then everybody would just chime in whenever you get this long string of things. I would think that would be a good way to communicate without us having to get together and try to have 30 people talking over each other. What that would also help to sort of streamline out a bit. Maybe chat is not the right thing because there's so much other stuff, but I'm not familiar with those too much, to tell you the truth. The other thing I found difficult, since I'm a Ward 7 representative, okay, that one of my jobs is sort of get people from my area, get information to get them to somehow communicate. But I find, for example, the new apartment complex I have here is really more like a gated community. You can't even get in. Have a building that they can share and do things in, but you can't get in. You don't live there, so you can't get in. And the people that manage the place aren't ever there, as far as I know. So like you can't really get to these people because you don't even know who they are. So I'm having some difficulty figuring out how to do some of this. Of how do you actually communicate? And because you've got like over 200 people there for sure, but I don't know how to get to them and talk to them. And also with the COVID right now, I'm not sure you want to get into a large room either. So I don't know how one manages that with their management, for example, of how to do that. So some of the sample size, I think, has something to do with the situation we're in today. But I also haven't figured out how you get to people. Okay, I just wanted to point that out. I just don't know how.
I think that's
I
a
think-
great point, Peter, and it's something that we're all kind of struggling with in many different ways. But if you, in your ward, want to talk about brainstorming how we can reach out more in that ward, I'm happy to have that conversation with you offline, Peter. I actually have contacts to that management company, and would be happy to, maybe we can work something out there. So things like that, if you want ideas of maybe how to spread them. I know a lot of people on this committee have their own kind of email lists of people they communicate with, or they have like a newsletters, or they have some social media, right, that they have as communication chains. But that old-fashioned communication chain is something I was talking to some of the senior groups about, right? You can't even get into the senior buildings to post on notice boards now. With the interfaith, with the continuum of care, everything's very much on lockdown. So trying to find different ways to reach these groups is important. We are going to have a big ad in the Telegraph the Sunday the 3rd, because that's what we've been hearing from a lot of the senior groups, is that they still rely on the Telegraph, and we haven't had enough in there. It's kind of expensive, but so we're going to have a big ad on that Sunday to try and raise awareness too. But in other ways, we would have had physically gone and visited these buildings, right? Put up flyers, sent things out, and that's very difficult to do in COVID. So thinking creatively about this, I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you about how we could do that too.
Yeah, you might also put something into Union Leader, because I get the Union Leader. I don't get the Telegraph.
Okay, that's a great point. I appreciate that. We will I'll look into that too.
Thank you, Peter. That was a great idea. One other thing we have done is for some of those communities is we've partnered with the library. The library was handing out flyers, United Way, a couple other direct human-to-human contact. Those who are still having human-to-human contact have raised their hand and said yes. We'll help with that as well. Anybody else have a question, comment, concern?
Well, I will, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jean.
Okay, I put in a chat comment, and this is maybe a mechanical question for Will. The third or fourth chart you showed today had a flow chart, and in the middle of it was a set of goals. Now, my question is, those goals that were presented in an early chart today, how do they relate to the goal setting that's going to take place at and after the public meeting?
So I think you're referring to this flow chart.
No.
Is that right?
No. Before that, I think, or maybe right there.
Oh, this.
No, the flow chart right there. You've
Same.
got goals, right?
Yeah. Okay. So.
And they're listed goals. There is text in every one of those lines.
Well, right now it just says goal. So what you have is the elements are land use and development, housing. These are the same as these plain elements. This frame, this diagram that you see where it says goal, 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 those are where, once this public meeting's done, once we have these statements settled, there's, going to be 5 of these per element. So the piece of information that the discussion will be for each of these breakout groups is basically the equivalent of, a piece of paper, right? With 5 statements times 6. So like 30-ish statements. Not everyone in each one of these breakout groups is gonna wanna talk about arts and culture as much as they're gonna wanna talk about another thing. Or maybe a lot of people interested in arts and culture will be in one, breakout group because that's when they, ended up in. And so those 30 statements at a different level of feedback will be sort of revised, modified. It seems like something's missing. This one's great. You should really be like affordable housing. You're listing it as just one goal of housing. I think that's the fundamental issue facing Nashua today. Like everyone's going to have different kinds of opinions about that. And so our job will be to collect that information via the diligent work of note takers and try to sort of come up with the set of, 30 something of these things that become the goals of the master plan. subject to maybe some little tweaks here and there if, as we mentioned before, feedback continues to evolve. And then from there, the actions that we work on, the additional feedback that we get from people, in the digital mapping platform will be, they'll need to tie back to these goals that we're setting, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think I heard you say that this list of specific goals on this chart are just notional, and that you're going to not start with that list of goals at the public meeting. Is that correct?
So so what it says here is, equity, resilient. You mean equity, resilience, climate protection? Is that what you're talking about?
I think I can help here. Jean,
Okay.
There are no goals on this chart yet.
Yes, they're listed in text.
No, those are just the topics. It's just simply the topics that are on this chart.
Okay.
These topics, so in the next couple of days, you'll get an email with very draft goals. That's what we'd like you to become familiar with for the meeting, so that as you go into a breakout session, you know what these goals are, and you can help with your knowledge and experience have some of those discussions with the other people in your breakout group about the goal, about what you think is good, what isn't, maybe we should change it, how this works, how it doesn't. So there are no goals yet. We're going to send you those draft ones in advance so that you can look at them and then help seed and have those discussions at the public meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
Dan O'Donnell, you had a comment?
Hi, yes, I do. First of all, because I know somebody's seen me for the first time, I'm on the Great American Downtown Board of Directors. I'm the president of the executive board. So a question, as you're talking about reaching people, I think one of the things you may want to think about, but I don't know what kind of budget you have to be able to work with, is you can, going back to the conversation about Facebook, you can go on Facebook. So like, for instance, for my business, I do real estate, right? If I have a condominium that's for people 55 and older, what I do is I go on Facebook, and you probably all know this, that there's information about all of us out there. Well, I can go on there and I can pick, people who are over a certain age, people who live in a certain neighborhood, people who have certain interests. So if you're trying to get input on stuff, as I was looking at that other chart a second ago. So let's say you were talking about culture and whatever. You could actually go on there through Facebook, and they already have the things there, and and you can actually draw a line showing a part of Nashua even, and say, hey, who's involved in arts and whatever, those type of things in the city. There's lists of all those people. You can really narrow it down quite a bit. And then if it goes to those people, you're going to get kind of the responses. You're getting your question going to the right kind of people. And also, for instance, for Alderman Guarino, on his ward, for instance, you can actually put little lines, around there and send something out just to those people. And again, if it's something to do with seniors, you can just get people who are over a certain age, and it guarantees to go to just those people. And there's more people out there that are looking at that every day. And it just, when that stuff pops up on your screen, I don't know if you ever go, if you ever put in tonight, look for a blanket and watch what happens on Facebook. You're going to get all these things saying blankets on sale. Is it, what the heck? I have a thing from an end table from a year and a half ago that every manufacturer in the world sends me stuff still. But it's kind of a cool thing to get to those people. So, but you pay for that, but you can pay for as little as you want. So for instance, if we put $1 a day into that, you're going to get about 800 people a day in that topic area that you're looking for that'll actually receive that, and it'll go exactly to the people you want. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, but that may
Facebook ads, great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I don't see any hands raised on my side. Sarah, do you have any?
I don't at the moment.
Okay, and I think we read through all the comments. So if anybody didn't put a comment or raise their hand, if you just want to ask your question, just unmute yourself and go for it. I think we've reached the point of pandemonium of everyone doing it at the same time. So no, nobody?
I have something I can bring up. It's maybe a little not really off topic, but it's it's communicating with all with all our other communities around us. You've heard about the Amazon thing over in Hudson, right? Where Amazon wants to buy the golf course. Okay, and there's a big controversy over that. I don't know who's going to win that, but I imagine Amazon's going to end up being over there. But what struck me was with all this is I don't golf, so I decided to go over there to see what the place looks like. And it is a gorgeous place over there, that golf course. But what I was thinking is that it's on the river. It's a very large area and it's on the river, and Amazon doesn't need the land on the river. So why Hudson isn't thinking about asking Amazon to give them a strip along the river so they could have a linear park there that connects to the bridge, because the bridge itself, goes over to Nashua. You can walk from Nashua to Hudson across that bridge, and you could go have a linear park there. But nobody ever seemed to think about, how can you take an opportunity and make something, because that park could connect to Nashua if they had one. And Amazon doesn't need that property along the river. They just want to build warehouses.
Peter, I think that this is a good point. And there's a couple people on this call who are actively, in conversations. Jay Mankara from the National Regional Planning Commission, who's talking about regional issues with this project. And certainly I know Matt Sullivan, the planning director with the planning board members here, are also going to be talking about regional impact. And so that is a good point, not necessarily germane to this, but those are all good points that we can include in some of those further discussions going forward. Because you're right, it is a massive project.
But I had to get it off of my chest.
Yeah, you're good. You did good. This is a good way to throw that out there.
Okay,
This is good.
Awesome. It is 6:13. We have scheduled 15 minutes left. I'm sure that everyone would love 15 minutes back of their evening. I do not want to cut anybody short, though. If you do have any other comments, questions, concerns, shout outs.
I would just remind you all to look for that email with the advertisement for the public meeting coming up. And also we'll be asking via email if you'll be willing to be a note taker in one of the breakout groups. Or if you're used to facilitating, if you have some of that, we have quite a lot of facilitators who hopefully we can tap for this. But we don't know how many people are going to show up at the last meeting. We had around 130. And so that's a lot of breakout rooms. So we want to line up quite a few note takers. So in the email, if you could please respond to me if you're willing to fill one of those roles. And please share the information that we give you as wide and far as possible over the holidays.
Yes, agreed. Homa had a great point. Homa, if that's something that you end up putting together, I would be more than happy to speak in between. I do not see any of us putting together a community holiday extravaganza through this committee, but if a different committee or organization wanted to put that together, or if anybody has any events that they would like somebody, either Sarah, myself, or somebody else from the planning department, would be more than happy to be guest speakers to groups or audiences. Please don't feel that we will leave you alone and by yourself to have all of these conversations. You can absolutely invite us to do so.
I think that Paul Shea would be the perfect person to organize that.
I felt that Paul was going to be voluntold on this, and I was trying to steer it back to Homa, Paul.
I appreciate that, Homa. Thank you.
You are the king of these type of, like you do the winter holiday stroll. So this year, Nashua, we don't have anything like that. So we need something to bring the community together for Nashua, like, get everyone excited. Oh, there's going to be, we can invite school kids that are in the choir or whatever to sing Christmas carols. And then in between, Paul Shea can do his little thing like, hey, who wants to talk about this? What are your what are your plans? What do you want in Nashua? And then now we're going to move on to Marjorie is going to play her violin or whatever. Or, you can have your a bunch of musicians doing their skits. And then in between each of those things, we can have someone just, bringing up certain topics, and people can just start their little chats about what they want.
If you would like to put that together, I'd be more than happy to be a speaker in between.
No, I didn't see it. My son is actually in the hospital right now. I'm really busy. I've got a full-time job, got sick kid, I got too much on my plate, but that's just a suggestion. And I think that we will probably get a lot of people wanting to, hop on to see what's going on. What's this community holiday thing,
Are you saying we could sweeten the deal and get more feedback, perhaps, if we had some?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Homa.
What do you think, Paul?
I think with the timeline that we're
It's
working,
about done.
We've got just a few short weeks until the next public meeting, and it's tough. We have been working to do some great programs that get people excited about the holidays and whatnot. But in terms of the context of this project, I don't know that we've got the time to pull something together. But it's a very lovely idea. Absolutely.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. Well, just a suggestion.
We'll keep that one in our back pocket for sure. Anyone else? Going once? No? All right. You will see, like Sarah said, an email coming out to you tomorrow with kind of all of the templates that you need to post, whether that's through a newsletter, on your social media. Please, you don't have to record a video of yourself. You can record a video of your kids talking about the future of Nashua. Paul Shea, again, we're looking at you. Or post a picture. You don't have to do a video. Spread it around. It would be awesome to see those. And then I think maybe a couple days before the public meeting, which is January 6th at 6 p.m., save the date, we will reach back out and just as a reminder, make sure everybody can make it, see what kind of response you've had, see if you have any questions, and make sure that we're all ready to go. Awesome.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody. We will see you soon. Stay healthy, happy, and safe. We'll see you next year. Bye.